Isn't it strange that religious people like to say we are God's children, but we aren't God's? Is not the child of a cat, or the offspring of a dog, a dog? How can you claim to be a child of God, but reject the idea that you are a God? That's like saying my parents are human, but I'm not. In the Jewish faith, it is very clear. Every Jew knows that we are just a spark of the divine. If I were to go to a church, I would hear everybody saying, I'm a child of God. So if you're a child of God, then definitely you are God. Isn't that right? If you're a child of a cat, then of course you're a cat. Misinterpretation is because of the way we read the Torah, the Bible. See, the Bible said that the Lord God breathed into man the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So if it was not for the breath of God that goes into the man, man would not realize divinity. It was the breath of God, which is the divinity part of man. But I guess when you read the Torah, you thought that when God breathed into man the breath of life, it was just the kind of breath that you're breathing. So it doesn't make a difference to you because it's ordinary breath. But when you read the Hebrew version, you don't find it that way. Because when God gave life to the animals, God used the word nefesh. But when God gave life to humanity, God uses the word neshama, a Hebrew term which does not really mean simple breath that you breathe. So when you read the Torah in its Hebrew version, you're getting a different idea. And I'm trying to help you to realize that the divinity which God places in every man is the neshama, the breath, which God breathed into man. And has man really fallen? Not exactly. You see, what is happening is that in the Garden of Eden, there was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there was a tree of life. And you have to ask yourself, how come Adam and Eve was tempted to eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil instead of eating the tree of life? How come? Can't they take the tree of life first? If they have taken the tree of life, then they would have lived forever. That's what the Torah says. So, and certainly the tree of life is a better tree than the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? So if Adam and Eve was in the midst of the garden, they should have taken the tree of life. But how come he didn't take the tree of life? The reason is because, according to the Jewish faith, the tree of life is actually inside the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In other words, you cannot see the tree of life until you open the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay, so based on that truth, then you begin to realize that what's happening is that when men open or add the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of life is inside, but they were kind of confused. The knowledge of good and evil somewhat distract men from the divinity which is inside. Do you realize that it's all a metaphor? The tree of life is inside us, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is all around us. So what we did was we were distracted by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We were distracted by the illusion of thought. Because thought is a duality, and we were distracted by our duality. A deeper reading of the Bible, in its metaphor, we realize that man has not fallen, but rather we are kind of unable to reach out to the tree of life which is inside us because of the distraction of the illusion of thoughts. We don't realize that there is this breath in us. this neshama I mean, this I am. And we don't realize that we need to have access to that breath within each of us to gain access to the divinity, the one presence, the I am. All of us thought we are just mere physical beings. But God gave us a clue. He said this, He said it's not good for man to be alone. And I'll tell you in a minute why that is a clue of how you can gain access to the breath of God. Man himself is of the dust of the ground, and the man must return to the dust. The breath of God is forever is just one presence. It is not yin-yang, it is one. But in the case of man himself, who is the flesh and blood, it is a yin-yang. So notice very carefully that there is divinity in every one of us. But also notice very carefully that the physicality of which we are part of requires an access to the breath of divinity before we can experience divinity or I am. And how do we gain access to the breath? It is actually written in the Torah, but we don't know about it. When God said it is not good for man to be alone, God is actually telling man that this is the way you enter back to divinity. The process is like a sexual intercourse. That's what God is saying. You have to relate with your opposite, which is your woman. And as a result of this relationship with your opposite, you must penetrate. You must penetrate deep enough into the opposite, and the opposite must allow you to have that penetration. And this is union. You enter into a whole. Let me repeat, very interestingly, you enter into what seems a whole within both of you. And in that whole will rise the presence, your own presence. In the physical world, your own presence is personified as the child that's born from your union. But in truth, this physical union is actually telling you the truth of how we can gain access to the breath of God. Why? Because when we have a sexual intercourse, I'm very, very sure you will breathe hard. That's right. When you touch deep into the woman will breathe hard. That's right. That is how the breath is blown out. And that's how your presence is brought forth. But don't get me wrong. I'm saying that the access to the breath of God is like a sexual intercourse. That's right. I'm not saying that access to the breath of God is the sexual intercourse. No. The sexual intercourse is the physical way in which we discover our own presence in our child, physical child. Our physical child represents me, isn't that right? So that's what it means. I discover my own presence through a sexual intercourse in a physical way. But when it comes to the spiritual methodology, it's exactly the same, except that you need to relate with your opposite, not in a physical woman, but rather with everyone of this world. You relate it with them in such a way that there is a penetration. That's not easy. There's a penetration into the whole. Right. And through that penetration, you discover the breath of the world. That's right. The breath of the world and the breath of yourself, from which arises the one true presence, I am. So you will notice that this ancient book called the Torah, which contains the story of the Garden of Eden, is a book filled with metaphors. You have to understand the meaning of it. It's not just a mere story. As I stated here very clearly to you, that the breath of God was blown into the man That is the living presence of God. And that living presence, we must access to that living presence. And it is breath. And having access to that living presence, then we are also alive. But the man, which is the body, it is not good for that man to be alone. So there's a duty given to this man. And what is that? That man must have a relationship with his opposite, with his woman. Yes, and through that relationship with the opposite, there is a penetration into the whole. And through that deep penetration, unity with the opposite, a child is born, a presence is brought forth. A presence which is of your own is brought forth in that relationship. You will discover that although this sexual intercourse is a true action that we do in our daily life as adults, it is also a metaphor. It's a metaphor of how we brought forth our own presence within ourselves to discover the I am. I've spoken many times in my videos that if a man is silent and go into meditation and enters silent, remove all his thoughts, that is not penetration. That is not having a relationship with the other part of you. Just remaining silent and folding your legs and going into a meditative posture, you are not entering presence. You are simply dead. A man is, being of flesh and blood, is actually already dead. And a man, to be alive, he must have access to the breath. And to have access to breath, you must enter, you must penetrate the hole that is between two opposites. And how do you do that? I've always told you that you need to observe your thoughts. And why? Because your thoughts is the woman, and the observer is the man. So when you observe your thought, you must unite with the thought, not throw away the thought, not throw away the woman. You must unite with your thoughts. And through the unity with your thoughts, discover a breath between the thoughts and the observer. And there you discover I am, the true breath that was breathed into man at the beginning of existence. So let me repeat, a man is not alive. Because being one of the two, being a duality, he's not alive. He has to unite with the opposite to complete himself. And when I say unite with the opposite, you have to enter into the whole. You cannot just merely hug the woman. You must enter into the whole. And it must be a whole that you are entering into, so that a presence, the child, your child, can be born out of it. It's a metaphor, but yet it is the truth. And through that penetration, you access life, the presence of the child, the living child, which is of your own. The idea that you simply meditate and keep silence is a false idea. You can't do that. You have to unite with the opposite. And what is the opposite? The opposite is the woman, that's right. It is the physical woman that you are having a sexual intercourse with. That's right. But it's also the world in which you live in. Because the world in which you live in is your thoughts. As I've often told you, the world is a thought. And therefore relating with the world is part of the relationship, which is necessary, a duty for men. But when you relate with the world, you must penetrate. You must not hammer the other side. You must find a union with the world, enter into the hole in between, and then discover the breath that breathes from within all of us. It's a metaphor, but you have to do it. It is all right to be silent if during the silence you're very sensitive to the thoughts that's coming to you. That's right. Because in the silence, you can actually hear your own thoughts. So in that sense, it's very important. You want to hear your own thoughts, not the thoughts of everything, but the thoughts that is very deep inside you. You want to hear the thoughts. That's right. You want to hear the voice of the thought so that you can penetrate into the whole and discover breath. Many people are not silent. They're so busy in the world and they don't know what they're hearing. That's right. And they react to all the thoughts that are taking place. And because of the reaction that they have, not being silent, they could not really hear the thoughts, neither could they ever enter the breath of the thoughts. So being silent is definitely good if that's the purpose of your silence, to actually hear the thoughts within your soul. But if you say that you want to be silent because you want to throw away your thoughts, because you don't want your thoughts, you are in the wrong path. Because your thoughts is a message from your own karma. The thoughts that you are having is a message, and you got to deal with your thoughts so that you can deal with that karma and then reverse it. Let's be very frank. Some of you here could be hearing thoughts that's coming from yourself, which is very ugly to you. Yes. And so you want to throw them away. You can't help it because you need to throw them away. Because those thoughts, they're coming from yourself. They're very depressive as a result of poor background, as a result of past. You find those thoughts accusing you. You find so-called demons in your thoughts. You find yourself put down by your own very thoughts. You don't love yourself at all. So in that sense, if you want to find comfort, you probably throw away. If you want to find comfort, you probably kneel down and pray to God. There's no choice about that, okay? I cannot give a comment about that. Yes, if you cannot take those thoughts, embrace those thoughts as your own, and hear the breath of those thoughts, you might as well throw it away. But in my videos, I'm not encouraging you to that. I'm asking you to reverse your karma, right? Yeah. So to do that, you have to be silent to hear your thoughts. That's right. Your true and honest thoughts, no matter how self-accusing they may be, and discover presence in this way. If the force towards you is greater, then you can take it. If you can take it, you're having a sexual intercourse with a woman that is very strong on the opposite side, you will find presence far stronger this way. I have given you the answers to life. That's right. And I hope you will find the answer. All you need to do is simply observe your thoughts. That's what the angel told me, observe my thoughts. I did that for many, many years. Couldn't find a way. It was only 10 years after I observed my thoughts that I discovered that the thoughts and my observer could actually be in the same frequency. When I entered into that similar frequency with my thoughts, suddenly I discovered the voice of the thought. I discovered the breath that is within the whole universe. I discovered the living one, the living soul that makes alive all of us. As I said, man is not alive. This whole world is not alive. To be alive, you need to access with the living one, the breath of God. Once you have access to the living one, the I am, then you are alive. So the Torah spoke a very nice metaphor. It says about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which actually represents men. And it also says about the tree of life, which is inside the knowledge of good and evil, which is the breath within all of us. And if we could stretch our hand to take the tree of the life, then we will live forever. It is written in the Torah. It's all a metaphor. We are all human beings, and we are all dead, being flesh and blood. And that's why when you are born into this world, you will die. But the living one that is alive within all of us, that living one never dies. So once you reach and have access to the living one, you make real your will. Let me repeat that very wonderful and most important word. You make real your world. This world in which you live in is not owned by anyone. But once you have access to the living one, it is owned by the presence that you have realized. And this is how you reach the promised land that God promised His people. So before I close this video, I want to say that you are His people. The only problem is that you have not understood or realized the I am that is within you. You live this world through your thoughts. You are engaged in this world primarily at the level of thought. And at the level of thought, it's all an illusion. It's not alive. I've told you how you can discover that living one that is in all of us, but which you have not realized. To discover that, you may have to penetrate your woman. Your woman is the other side of you. Get it straight. Only by a penetration into the whole will a child be born from between that union. And this is the child of your own, the living presence that you now can claim as me. So even right now, as I try to explain to you, there are metaphors which you don't quite understand. I use the word whole, right? You need to penetrate to the whole. But do you understand what's the whole? You don't. And even then, when I keep on mentioning the word I am, do you understand what is I am? You don't. Because all your life you thought that the self that you have, the ego that you have, you thought that that is your I am. But that is not your I am. That is a thought. And that is an illusion. And that has never lived at all. You must enter the presence of the living one, the I am that is within you. Only then you make real your world. You make real yourself. You make real everything. And this is salvation. Don't miss my videos. It may sound repetitive, but actually it speaks slightly a different perspective in each video. To understand reality is very, very difficult. In the same way, there are scientists seeking to understand the world that we are part of. The scientist is also kind of completely confused. To understand the truth is very, very difficult. To understand the religion, that's not a problem. You just read the book. To understand what the religion tells you in its deeper level, that's not easy. So subscribe to my video. Let me show you the way home to where life is. Thank you. God bless you.